The story opens in a country being absolutely cooked by a record-breaking heat wave, hitting 52 degrees Celsius. The extreme heat has been going on for 15 days straight, warping the very city itself under the oppressive sun. Down on the ground, we find a construction site where work is somehow still underway despite the obvious danger. It's so hot that even the cicadas are just dropping dead out of the air, which is never a good sign. Two construction workers are completely drenched in sweat, complaining about how scorching the conditions have become. Their only saving grace is a single industrial fan they've set up, which is barely keeping them on their feet. One guy gripes that his cooling vest is about to melt, while a news report ironically advises everyone to stay indoors. Meanwhile, another worker in a truck is furious, wondering why the hell they haven't been ordered to stop working yet. Back at the dig site, one of the men suddenly hits something with his shovel that just won't budge. He's baffled by how hard it is, and his partner leans in, curious to see what they've just uncovered. The worker pulls out the object he hit, a strange rock with two dark holes that look eerily like eyes. His partner laughs it off, pointing out that the longer you stare, the more it starts to resemble a human face, and just as he says it, the thing starts to crack and split open. Both of them are instantly terrified, screaming as the object makes its move right in front of them. From the truck, their boss just sighs, figuring the two are finally hallucinating from the heat exhaustion. He yells at them to get in for a break, completely dismissing their panic over what he thinks is just a rock. The guys start walking back, bickering about who got scared, leaving the strange object behind them. But the moment they turn away, the rock cracks wide open as something begins to crawl out. A grotesque creature emerges, unfolding a mess of tentacles from what used to be a stone shell. At that same moment, a delivery driver speeds past, totally unaware and just apologizing for being late on the phone. The delivery driver from a moment ago is absolutely fuming, stuck at the construction site and already late, pulling up to the roadblock and wondering why on earth they're still working in this insane heat. He leans over and asks the guys in the truck if he can just squeeze past to make his delivery, and the boss, now taking a break, just waves him through, feeling bad for anyone working outside. The driver thanks them, but as he passes, that little creature from the rock is right by his tire, and in a flash, the thing scurries up and crawls right into his pant leg, completely unnoticed. Oblivious to his new passenger, the driver just gives a friendly wave and speeds off to finish his route. But as he rides away, something grotesque starts bulging out from the side of his neck, rapidly expanding and twisting as it emerges from his skin in a horrifying display. The construction worker in the truck can only stare in wide-eyed terror at what's unfolding right before him. The construction worker is left staring at the aftermath, trying to convince himself it was just a heat-induced hallucination. While the city continues to bake under a brutal 52-degree heat wave, the sky itself looking like an oven. And with the surface world being unbearable, people are flocking to the only refuge they have, the subway system, where we follow the crowds down into the relative cool of the underground station for Line 10. But even here, the platform is absolutely overflowing with commuters trying to escape the heat. And it's no better on the train itself, which is packed to the gills with sweaty passengers, leaving everyone fanning themselves desperately, trying to find any relief from the suffocating temperature, where we focus on a young office worker, looking completely drained as his phone suddenly starts to buzz, and he pulls it out to see a call coming in from his mom, answering to reassure her he's fine and promising a celebratory dinner since it's his last day of work. On the phone, the office worker, Xiao Jie, reassures his mom he's already arranged for her to move somewhere with a better climate, telling her he just needs to survive this one last day of work before everything gets better. He's clearly struggling in the oppressive heat, but tries to keep his voice steady for her sake. But then he glances down, getting a sudden bad feeling when he notices his shoelace is untied, and though his mom can tell something's wrong, he quickly dismisses her concern. As the train rumbles on, he tries to convince himself that today is the final hurdle before his new life begins. The doors slide shut at his station, and he steps out into the relative cool of the underground, only to find the direct passage to his office building is completely swamped with a massive crowd. Knowing he absolutely cannot be late today, he decides to risk the scorching heat above ground instead, emerging into the hellish cityscape and sprinting across the street just in time. He barely avoids getting flattened by a scooter, whose driver is just as desperate to get through the heat as he is. Finally making it across the street, Xiao Jie is completely wiped out from the short sprint in this insane temperature. He tries to pull himself together, annoyed but mostly just praying he can get through this one last day without any trouble. But as he enters his building, it's clear that's not going to happen, because a familiar, unwelcome face is waiting for him at the bottom of the stairs, blocking his path with a smug look and a bottle in his hand. And Xiao Jie's hope for a smooth day instantly evaporates as he realizes who it is. The man gets right to it, demanding this month's payment from him, then threatens to go to the loan sharks in Xiao Jie's own office building and borrow money using his name, leaning in with a twisted smile and calling him son as he waits for an answer. Xiao Jie desperately tries to control his fear, telling himself not to let this man see how scared he really is. And he's sweating profusely, struggling to keep a neutral expression in front of the man he calls father, fighting with every ounce of willpower to keep his emotions in check and refusing to break down. But his father just scoffs at him, completely disgusted by the look on his son's face. Finally giving in, Xiao Jie pulls out his wallet and hands over a thick stack of cash, telling himself it's okay, because this is the absolute last time he'll ever have to do this. With the money handed over, he warns the man to stay the hell away from his mother, but his father just laughs it off, waving goodbye and telling him to get back to work for more cash. As the man finally walks away, a delivery driver sprints up the stairs, completely unaware of what just happened, rushing right past Xiao Jie into the building and leaving him to process the whole miserable encounter. The delivery driver finally makes it inside, where everyone's just trying to escape the heat and enjoy the building's AC, but his customer is already waiting, absolutely furious that the delivery took an extra 20 minutes to arrive. The guy's main complaint is that his cold noodles are now lukewarm, and Xiao Jie just happens to witness the whole thing. It gets worse as the customer starts personally insulting him, basically saying he's worthless outside of this one job. The driver desperately tries to explain how bad the weather was, but it's clear this guy has zero sympathy. Watching from the side, Xiao Jie recognizes the frantic scooter driver from the street and feels a pang of pity. Deciding it's none of his business, he tries to just ignore the whole scene and head up to his office. But the customer just screams back that the heat isn't his problem, pulling out the ultimate threat, a bad review, which sends the driver into a complete panic, as he immediately starts begging the guy not to do it, pleading that he has a child to support and the company deducts a huge amount of pay for bad reviews. The customer is completely unmoved, telling the driver he needs to be taught a lesson for being late, and Xiao Jie tries to tune it out, telling himself to just get through this last day without any trouble. But the driver is still desperately pleading, mentioning his kid again as the customer just dismisses him, until finally, Xiao Jie can't take it anymore and speaks up for the guy. He tries to mediate, asking the customer if he really thinks this whole thing isn't going a little too far, but he stops short when he sees the look on the delivery driver's face change completely. The driver's still begging about the bad review, but his smile is stretching into something absolutely inhuman. Suddenly, something starts bulging from the driver's back, making the customer finally back off in confusion, and in a horrifying display, a grotesque mass of flesh erupts from the man's body. Everyone in the lobby freezes in shock, while Xiao Jie can only stare at the nightmare unfolding before him. In a horrifying burst, the grotesque mass completely erupts from the delivery driver's back, leaving everyone in the lobby, including Xiao Jie, absolutely paralyzed with shock and terror, and all he can think is that this was supposed to be his very last day of misery. But instead, he's staring down a multi-eyed monstrosity that just crawled out of a person, a creature that seems to be absorbing its host as even more glowing red eyes begin to appear. All while the city outside continues to bake under the oppressive 52-degree heat wave, the onlookers are still frozen, barely able to process what they're even looking at, as the creature now stands on what's left of the driver's legs, a truly disturbing sight. And Xiao Jie can't even begin to comprehend the nightmare that has just become his reality, when the monster suddenly lunges forward, and the angry customer is the first to fall. The monster looms over the lobby, its grotesque form casting a massive shadow over everyone inside, revealing a horrifying face with multiple glowing red eyes that lock onto the terrified crowd below. As people finally snap out of their shock and start screaming to run, the entire lobby erupts into pure chaos. But one guy bizarrely tells everyone to calm down, completely unfazed by the body on the floor. He's actually smiling, convinced this is all just an elaborate prank for a movie shoot or something, which is when the main creature launches a smaller, familiar-looking parasite right at his face, and the rock-like thing smacks him dead on before he can even process what's happening. He immediately starts screaming in agony as the parasite's tentacles burrow deep into his skin, his pleas for help lost in the crowd as the creature begins to take him over completely. All Xiao Jie can do is watch, paralyzed, as the nightmare unfolding in front of him gets even worse. The man who thought it was a prank finishes his horrifying transformation right in front of Xiao Jie, and his body erupts, launching a whole swarm of smaller squid-like parasites into the air, sending the entire lobby into a screaming panic as everyone finally realizes this is not a drill. These things move at lightning speed, flooding the floor and chasing down anyone who isn't fast enough, turning the desperate escape into a full-on stampede for the exits. Amid the chaos, a security guard is trying to make a break for it when one of the parasites locks onto him, but a woman suddenly grabs him, pleading for help and saying she can't keep up. Seeing his chance to play the hero, the guard gets a seriously creepy look on his face, and he turns to face the danger, only to get instantly taken out by a parasite to the back of the head. The woman just smirks as he falls, coldly remarking on how predictable men are, leaving Xiao Jie to witness the brutal scene. Amid the chaos, some of the survivors actually start fighting back, smashing the small squid-like creatures on the floor, which inspires another security guard, Old Zhang, who completely misreads the situation and thinks he's a hero. He has a brief moment of doubt, realizing how bad things are, but quickly shakes it off for the sake of his ego, trying to rally the panicking crowd by yelling that the parasites are actually easy to kill, a truly terrible idea, and just as his colleague begs him to run, a parasite latches right onto his shoulder mid-sentence. The thing immediately burrows into his neck, and the infection starts taking hold in a matter of seconds. As everyone backs away in terror, his friend points out the grotesque bulge already forming under his skin, leaving Old Zhang to scream for help, completely losing control as the parasite takes over his body. Xiao Jie can only watch in horror as the man desperately claws at his own throat, trying to stop the transformation, but it's too late and his head erupts in a horrifying display, finishing the process right in front of them. Xiao Jie's friend desperately tries to pull him away from the unfolding horror as the security guard's head completely erupts in a grotesque final transformation, his last human scream echoing through the lobby as the monster takes takes full control. Other survivors yell at them to just run, callously dismissing the victim as a simple security guard. But the newly formed creature hears every single word, its rage beginning to boil. It seems to remember its past life, thinking about how it always helped people like them, only to question what the point was when they never showed any respect. And as the crowd flees, its resentment solidifies into a single thought: they all deserve to die. The monster's gaze sweeps over the lobby, its human bitterness now fueling a monstrous purpose, and with a terrifying grin, it fixates on the crowd, promising to show them what happens when they look down on someone. The creature's grin widens, remembering how it was disrespected just like that poor delivery guy, and as Xiaoji's friend screams for him to run, the monster's face twists in pure rage. Still wearing its security cap, the thing lunges forward with terrifying speed, letting out a massive roar as it charges directly into the panicking crowd. It immediately makes good on its promise, taking out one of the survivors in a single brutal move, while another man gets caught from behind, his pleas for help completely ignored by the fleeing mob. The lobby descends into absolute chaos as everyone scatters, trying to escape the rampaging monster, and Xiao Jie forces himself to stay focused, knowing he has to find an exit right now. He spots a potential escape route down the hall towards the elevators and restrooms, where a small group is already piling into an elevator, yelling that they're closing the doors. Xiao Jie and his friend just barely manage to shove their way into the packed elevator, but just as the doors are about to close, a hand suddenly forces them back open, and it's the same woman who sacrificed the guard earlier, pushing her way inside with a smug look, which sends the crowd outside into a rage, screaming that the elevator is over capacity now. Inside, people start pleading their cases, with one woman even mentioning she has a child to get back to. And after a moment of hesitation, Xiao Jie makes a hard choice and shoves someone out, throwing the smirking woman directly into the path of the oncoming parasite swarm. As the doors finally shut, he's left running down a hallway, cursing how this day has turned out. He can't believe this is happening, especially since this was supposed to be his very last day of misery, the one day he was finally going to escape from his old life and start over. With the parasite swarm right behind him, Xiao Jie makes a mad dash for the men's restroom, absolutely refusing to die here on what was supposed to be his last day of misery. The creatures slam against the door just as he gets it shut, a wave of bodies trying to break through, but it's a temporary fix at best, as the things immediately start pouring in from under the door. He backs away, completely cornered and desperately scanning the room for any other way out, sliding down the wall in exhaustion as the reality of his situation starts to sink in hard. For a split second, he wonders if he's actually managed to find a safe spot, when he suddenly remembers the first-floor restroom has a window he can jump out of. At that exact moment, a parasite smacks right against that very window with a sickening thud, and he turns to find his one and only escape route is already completely blocked off. The sounds from outside confirm his worst fears as the city descends into a fiery, screaming nightmare, and Xiao Jie's eyes widen in absolute horror, realizing the entire city might have already fallen as more creatures crawl in from every direction, when one of the things on the window suddenly detaches and drops right into the room with him, immediately launching itself straight for his head with terrifying speed. But in that split second, his panic hardens into pure, focused resolve, and he reacts instantly, whipping his arm around to knock the parasite off its course, then grabbing a nearby mop and bringing it down hard to finish the job, leaving him staring at the splattered remains on the floor, catching his breath after that close call, only to conclude this supposed safe haven is anything but secure. He pulls out his phone hoping for a miracle, but to absolutely no one's surprise, there's no service. Then a plan clicks into place, the underground passage connecting his building to the next one, which means he has a direct path to the subway, giving him a sliver of hope to hold on to. Knowing he can't go out there empty-handed, he snaps the mop handle over his knee, fashioning a crude but sharp spear and steeling his nerves for what comes next. With a promise to his mom on his mind, he carefully pushes open the restroom door to peek outside, only to be met with a scene of absolute carnage as the main creature feasts on the fallen. He quickly realizes the smaller parasites are gone, leaving just that one monster between him and his escape, and the passage he needs is just down the hall, a straight shot right through the danger zone. Now all he has to do is get past the grotesque thing without it ever noticing he's there. With the main creature distracted, Xiao Jie sees his opening and quietly begins to move toward the exit, making a desperate sprint down the hall for the underpass door with his makeshift spear in hand. And for a brief moment, he actually thinks he's going to make it out of this alive, glancing back to confirm the monster is still completely preoccupied with the carnage on the floor. As the thing lets out a guttural roar, its glowing red eyes completely focused on its grim task, allowing Xiao Jie to finally reach the door, a wave of relief washing over him as he grabs the handle. But just as he's about to escape, he hears heavy, deliberate stomping coming from behind him, and he turns to see the transformed security guard has spotted him and is now charging forward, realizing with dawning horror that the sounds he heard weren't random but someone's footsteps. But there's no time to panic, as he forces himself to focus on the one thing that matters: getting through that door. Meanwhile, another survivor steals her nerves, absolutely determined to get out of this building alive, and she makes a desperate break for it up a flight of stairs with the parasite swarm nipping at her heels, barely reaching an exit door just as the creatures are about to overwhelm her completely. She slams the heavy door shut, crushing a few of the parasites in the process, only to turn around and realize she's not alone in this supposed safe zone. because she's now face to face with the transformed security guard who seems to recognize her. The woman, Ying, is completely frozen in terror as the monster looms over her. But then she realizes that since the thing can still speak, maybe there's a chance, trying to calm herself down by thinking if it's still a man, there must be a way to reason with it. So she raises a hand, preparing to talk her way out of this nightmare. Ying tries to play on the monster's sympathy, telling him he must have had a difficult life as a security guard. She even offers to accompany him in his final moments, acting as if she's accepted her own fate. Leaning in closer, she asks him to be kind to her, putting on the ultimate damsel in distress act. But her expression immediately hardens as she internally scoffs that all men are predictable fools, which is when the monster's eyes flare with rage, realizing he's been completely played. Ying's face drops in sheer panic as she sees her clever little plan has just backfired horribly. She immediately turns to run, cursing that this thing is far smarter than she ever anticipated. But the creature is way too fast, tackling her to the ground in a single furious lunge. Pinned beneath the monster, all she can do is stare up in absolute terror as it looms over her. And the transformed guard lets out a final roar, demanding she repay him for her deception. Pinned to the ground, Ying is convinced she's about to die, flashing back to a memory of a helpless little girl, and tears stream down her face as she accepts her fate, completely at the monster's mercy. Until Xiao Jie suddenly crashes the party, using his makeshift spear to absolutely demolish the parasite swarm around her, revealing a completely different side of himself, his face a mask of cold fury as he fights for his life. Leaning on his spear over the aftermath, he thinks about how he's been controlling his emotions since he was a kid, leaving nothing but a grotesque pile of defeated creatures in his wake, explaining to himself that no matter the feeling, happiness, sadness, or excitement, he's learned to suppress it completely, but that resolve is tested when the transformed security guard turns its glowing red eyes right on him. For a split second, pure dread flashes across his face as he locks eyes with the new threat, but he immediately hardens his expression, gripping his weapon and promising himself he can hold this back too. Instead of running, Xiao Jie just stares down the transformed guard, his face completely devoid of any fear, and the creature lets out a furious roar, clearly not expecting this kind of defiance from its next victim. But Ying snaps him out of it, grabbing his arm and screaming for him to get moving already. With the monster hot on their heels, the two of them make a desperate break for it down the hallway, and it's a full-on sprint for their lives as the creature's screams echo right behind them. Xiao Jie glances back, realizing with a grim certainty that the thing is gone them fast, so he makes a snap decision, shoving Ying ahead and telling her to get to the underpass while he holds it off. As she runs, Xiao Jie grabs the nearest weapon he can find, a fire extinguisher from the wall. His expression hardening once again, he pulls the pin, ready to face the monster head-on, and he unleashes a full blast right in the creature's face, making it shriek in surprise and pain. The blast from the fire extinguisher seems to freeze the creature solid in its tracks, leaving Xiao Jie stunned for a second that his desperate plan might have actually worked. He keeps up the pressure, slowly backing away while pinning the monster down with the foam, and from the relative safety of a doorway, Ying watches the entire scene unfold, her mind racing as she debates whether this guy is someone she can actually trust. She sees him standing his ground, a lone figure holding back the nightmare, but quickly rationalizes that since she technically saved him earlier, they're totally even. Turns out her name is Zhang Xiaomei, and her #1 principle is looking out for herself, which becomes a very pressing issue when the fire extinguisher finally sputters out. And without a second of hesitation, she grabs the nearest door handle to make her own escape. Without a moment's hesitation, Zhang Xiaomei slams the underpass door shut, locking it behind her to save herself, leaving Xiao Jie completely alone in the hallway with nothing but an empty fire extinguisher for protection. And just as the reality of his situation sinks in, the transformed guard breaks free from the foam. He turns around with dawning horror to see the monster charging straight for him down the narrow corridor. The creature is not only closing the distance fast, but it's also spitting out more of those rock-like parasites. With no other choice, Xiao Jie makes a desperate sprint for the next door he can find, reaching out for the handle in a last-ditch effort to find another way out of this nightmare. But his heart sinks as he pulls on the handle, realizing the door is completely locked shut. On the other side, Zhang Xiaomei is already walking away, having just sealed him in to cover her own escape, and now totally trapped, Xiao Jie can only stand there as the swarm of parasites flies right at his back. With the swarm of parasites flying right at his back, Xiao Jie is completely out of time, so he yells his mother's address through the door to the woman who just abandoned him, making one final desperate plea for her to check if his mom is safe. Then, with his last request made, he turns to face the incoming monsters with grim resolve, not just waiting for the end but preparing to fight back in the narrow hallway. And as the creatures close in, he absolutely refuses to go down without a struggle, managing to swat one away and even slam another against the wall in a desperate counterattack. On the other side, Zhang Xiaomei is frozen, his words about his mom clearly striking a chord, as she starts to wonder what she would do if her own child were in his position. And in a shocking change of heart, she grabs the handle, deciding to quickly open the door. Just as Zhang Xiaomei yanks the door open, her eyes widen in absolute shock, because Xiao Jie is already caught, a parasite's tentacle wrapped tightly around his face. He stumbles through the doorway and immediately collapses at her feet, the infection taking hold, leaving her to stare, realizing her rescue attempt was a few seconds too late. The grim reality of the situation hits her hard as she looks down at him, right before the transformed guard lets out a roar and charges straight for the open door. Thinking fast, she slams the heavy door shut, trapping the monster outside but leaving her alone with an infected man. And she looks down at Xiao Jie, telling his unconscious body she's sorry but he's already been bitten. Pleading for forgiveness, she promises to find his mother, trying to justify what she might have to do next. But then she notices he's still moving, so she starts dragging him away from the door, not ready to give up on him just yet. As the monster relentlessly pounds on the door, Zhang Xiaomei kneels over Xiaoji, thinking this is the end for her. She's just about accepted her fate when the creature is about to finally break through the door. But suddenly, a bottle shatters from off-screen, and a mysterious stranger absolutely smashes it right across the monster's face. Zhang Xiaomei can only stare in complete shock, totally confused by this unexpected turn of events. Her savior, a guy in a cap, calmly opens another bottle as if this is a normal Tuesday, letting out a tired sigh like dealing with monsters is just a massive inconvenience for him. She's still frozen, a single tear rolling down her cheek as she tries to make sense of it all. The transformed guard is left stunned and dripping, clearly not expecting that kind of welcome, while the new guy starts chugging his drink with a seriously unhinged grin on his face. The stranger is genuinely pissed, realizing the monster just made him waste one of his last few precious bottles. And he takes another swig, yelling at the creature for wasting his booze while Zhang Xiaomei watches from the doorway. Completely ignoring the monster, he casually turns to her and asks if she's unharmed, which is a wild question to ask right now. He then tells her there's a survivor shelter on the top floor and to just ignore the unconscious guy for now. She agrees through her tears, though she's privately wondering if she can really trust the word of a random drunkard. With that settled, he tells her to close the door and hide, finally turning his full attention back to the monster, which has fully recovered from the bottle to the face and lets out an absolutely deafening roar. But our new guy just smirks, announcing that it's time to light this thing up. He pulls out a rag, clearly about to whip up a makeshift firebomb right there in the hallway, only to start frantically patting his pockets, realizing in this critical moment that he can't find his damn lighter. The stranger finally realizes his bag was slashed open, which explains why he couldn't find his damn lighter. Back in the room, Zhang Xiaomei is still debating what to do with Xiao Jie, knowing he's infected and could turn any second. Deciding she can't take the risk, she starts to push his unconscious body away from the doorway. She steels herself for what comes next, peeking back out into the hallway to check on the fight, only for the stranger to suddenly yell right at her, clearly desperate for some help. He's screaming for a lighter as the monster lunges, leaving her to shout a completely useless warning. But instead of running, the guy just scoffs and turns to face the creature, which apparently used to be a city fighting champion. With no firebomb on the table, he just squares up, getting ready to throw hands with the tentacled monstrosity. Turns out the monster's resume is pretty impressive, being a former provincial boxing runner-up, with top physical training scores. So now it's Wang Chi's fists against a former champion, and he looks absolutely ready for the challenge. With a furious roar, Wang Chi throws a punch, yelling that he's not afraid of some monster, and he actually connects, landing a solid hit that sends the transformed guard stumbling back. He then yells at Zhang Xiaomei to check the unconscious guy's pockets for a lighter, telling her they won't last much longer without fire as the creature gets back on its feet. But the scene suddenly flashes back to a man desperately searching for his own lighter, his frustration growing as he tears through a drawer, furious that he can't have a smoke. Giving up, he just grabs a bottle and starts chugging it down in a fit of rage, while a terrified woman and a small child can only huddle in the corner and watch. The man then turns his attention to the woman, calling out to her with a drunken slur, and the memory ends with him committing a horrifying act of violence right in front of the kid. The flashback deepens, revealing a man raging at a woman over a missing lighter as a young boy watches in terror. His drunken fury escalates as he continues his tirade, his face twisted with pure rage, and he then turns on the boy, getting right in his face and accusing him of hiding the lighter as well. The kid is absolutely paralyzed with fear, tears streaming down his face as the man looms over him. In a horrifying outburst, he smashes a bottle right over the boy's head, screaming that they're both losers, and another bottle comes flying, shattering right next to the kid's head as he tries to shield himself. The man's rant continues, yelling about how they live off him but can't do this one simple thing. He screams about how useless they are, punctuating his words with another violent outburst, and the woman desperately tries to shield the boy with her own body as the abuse continues around them. The memory ends with a man's final demand, reflected in the boy's eye as he raises his hand to strike again. The flashback continues with the man's drunken demand for a lighter echoing in the present moment, as Zhang Xiaomei frantically searches Xiao Jie's pockets, only for him to suddenly grab her arm. She's completely stunned, having no idea what's happening, as he stares at her with an intense look, and he just repeats the word lighter, his hand gripping his own pocket with surprising strength. Turns out, he's been conscious this whole time, pulling out the very thing they've been looking for, revealing he's always carried one with him, his expression now cold and focused despite the infection. Zhang Xiaomei immediately snaps out of her shock, screaming at him to hurry and give it to Wang Chi, who hears the commotion from the hallway and turns just in time to see what's happening, because Xiao Jie flicks the lighter open, then calmly tells Wang Chi to throw the bottles for the firebomb. Wang Chi is shocked, realizing the kid he wrote off as a goner is now calling the shots. Without missing a beat, Wang Chi hurls both bottles directly at the charging creature, which shatter on impact, completely dousing the monster in alcohol, soaking its entire body in the highly flammable liquid. He immediately screams at Xiao Jie to make his move right now, and the kid throws the lit lighter straight into the mix, instantly engulfing the transformed guard in a massive explosion of fire. The creature lets out a horrifying shriek as the flames completely consume it, its grotesque form starting to melt and char from the intense heat, leaving the three survivors to just stare at the horrifying result of their plan. But the damn thing is still standing, roaring in agony as it continues to burn. As the monster finally collapses into a smoldering pile on the floor, the three survivors can only watch, and Zhang Xiaomei dares to hope it's finally over. While Xiao Jie remains grimly silent beside her, Wang Qi scoffs at their doubt, confidently claiming he's dealt with these things before and fire always works. He even turns to Xiao Jie, giving him a rare compliment for having the guts to pull off the plan, then tries to formally introduce himself as Wang Qi, hoping to get their names in this brief moment of calm, but Xiao Jie suddenly cuts him off, telling him to wait as he notices something is horribly wrong, leaving Wang Qi completely confused by the sudden change in mood, clearly thinking the danger had passed. That's when Xiao Jie points out the horrifying truth. The charred remains on the floor are still moving. The burnt mass starts to reform into a smaller, grotesque, slug-like creature, much to everyone's shock. And in a truly bizarre twist, the new form seems to enjoy the heat, commenting on how nice the temperature is. The slug creature gleefully announces the heat is perfect for its next stage, as its body immediately starts to swell and erupt into a mass of writhing tendrils, leaving Zhang Xiaomei completely paralyzed with a fresh wave of terror. Because this thing isn't just reforming, it's screaming about its own evolution, a sight that leaves all three survivors staring in absolute disbelief. And Wang Qi's earlier confidence completely shatters, realizing this is a whole new level of bad, so he immediately screams for everyone to run for their lives. But the newly evolved monster lets out a deafening roar that echoes through the hall, sending a strange red energy wave washing directly over the three of them, and in an instant all of their eyes begin to glow with the same menacing red light. Inside his own mind, Xiao Jie realizes the creature's energy wave has a voice, and it knows his deepest secret, telling him it can sense his fear as he's surrounded by grotesque visions of his own suppressed emotions. The entity seems to feed on this terror, encouraging him to be afraid and just let it all out, promising that if he finally releases everything he's been holding back his entire life, he will receive the ultimate reward for his suffering, a full-blown evolution, and his body begins to contort as the parasite inside him starts forcing a horrifying transformation. To fuel this change, the creature dredges up the most traumatic memory he has, flashing back to his childhood and the image of his mother trying to protect him, shielding a young, terrified Xiao Jie from the wrath of his abusive father, a memory so deeply buried that the parasite is now using it to break him completely. But inside his own mind, Xiao Jie flatly refuses to give in to the parasite's psychic attack, remembering the violence from his past not as a source of terror, but as a trigger for the monstrous emotions he's learned to bury deep inside himself, declaring that fear is just another variable he's learned how to control. The defiance enrages the entity, which screams back that he is the real monster for suppressing everything, and it floods his mindscape with grotesque visions of his own repressed feelings to overwhelm him. The parasite's influence tightens as it forces the traumatic memory to the forefront of his mind, and for a split second, his cold resolve finally begins to crack under the pressure, as he's forced to watch his father pathetically beg for forgiveness after another outburst, while his mother screams for the man to stay away, desperately trying to protect her child. Inside his mind, Xiao Jie realizes the others are trapped in the exact same hallucination, where the grotesque entity representing his own suppressed feelings declares it wants to be unleashed, looming over all three of them as a towering manifestation of pure, unrestrained emotion. The thing immediately lashes out, its tendrils shooting straight for the terrified Wang Qi and Zhang Xiaomei, who can only cower as the monster prepares to feed on their overwhelming fear. But Xiao Jie just watches them, his expression hardening into cold, calculated resolve, and when one of the tendrils finally whips toward him, he doesn't even flinch, instead grabbing the psychic attack right out of the air and crushing it in his bare hand, his grip so unbelievably strong it completely shatters the mental construct with pure force, leaving the entity absolutely stunned that a mere human could fight back on its own turf. With the others still paralyzed by fear, Xiao Jie stands his ground as the psychic tendrils recoil, his hand bleeding from where he literally crushed the mental attack with his own willpower, and the towering entity, a manifestation of his own emotions, asks if this is what he really wants. But instead of fear, Xiao Jie's eyes are filled with nothing but cold, unwavering defiance. The psychic attack then shifts, reflecting Wang Qi's own violent past in a shattered mirror. But Xiao Jie completely hijacks the hallucination, screaming at the creature to bring it on, clenching his bloody fist as he prepares to fight his own inner demons head-on. The raw, unfiltered aggression seems to feed the entity in a way that terror never could, and the monster actually seems to enjoy this new sensation, calling his intense emotion nice, which immediately triggers a flashback to his childhood, revealing the traumatic origin of his iron will. The flashback throws us into Xiao Jie's childhood, with him on the floor after a violent outburst, tears streaming down his face as he looks up in absolute terror, while his father coldly informs him that crying just makes the situation worse. The man then grabs him by the face, screaming at him for showing any emotion at all, demanding that he hold back his tears and just take it. But the boy can't stop, which only fuels his father's rage even further, so he makes the one threat that will finally break him. He'll drag his mother into it. At that moment, something inside the young Xiao Jie just snaps, and the tears instantly stop, which earns him a twisted compliment from his father for his sudden cold expression, and back in the present, the psychic entity finds this exact emotion delicious, calling it nice. Back in reality, Xiao Jie clenches his bloody fist, having literally shattered the mental attack with his bare hands, and without a second thought, he takes off down the hall. Drawing the evolved monster away from the others, Wang Qi can only stare after him, completely stunned by what just happened, wondering how the hell that kid could be so unbelievably reckless after everything. He snaps out of it and turns to Zhang Xiaomei, trying to shake her out of the psychic hangover. She finally comes to, looking totally lost and trying to piece together the nightmare they just went through, admitting that the creature's mental games dredged up some seriously bad memories for her as well. But Wang Qi is already looking down the hall where Xiao Jie had disappeared, realizing he can't just let the kid who saved them run off to his death, so he tells her to find a safe place to hide, promising they might meet again as he prepares to go after him alone. From the relative safety of the doorway, Zhang Xiaomei watches in horror as Xiao Jie sprints down the hall, leading the evolved creature away from her. He quickly realizes that since fire didn't work, he'll have to try the exact opposite, barely managing to stay ahead of the monster's lashing tendrils, and he decides to bet everything on a single door at the end of the corridor, which turns out to be a massive walk-in freezer, a pretty solid plan B. He slams the button to get inside, hoping to trap the heat-loving creature, but the monster is just too fast. Catching up to him at the very last second, it grabs him and violently throws him straight into the freezing cold room, pinning him to the floor as it looms over him, screaming that it wants his emotions. Pinned inside the freezer, Xiao Jie watches with cold resolve as his last-ditch plan kicks into gear, with the temperature rapidly plummeting to a brutal negative 35 degrees Celsius, which immediately starts to affect the heat-loving creature's grotesque tendrils, causing its entire body to rapidly ice over and become dangerously brittle, until the monster is completely encased in a thick layer of frost, totally immobilized. But the thing realizes this is just like the fire extinguisher, a temporary inconvenience at best, and Xiao Jie knows he only has a few precious seconds before it thaws out and recovers. So he scrambles away from the frozen statue, desperately looking for a weapon, grabbing a huge side of frozen meat hanging from a hook in the corner of the room, and with a massive swing, he absolutely shatters the immobilized tree creature into a million icy pieces. With a final desperate swing, Xiao Jie uses the frozen meat to completely shatter the immobilized monster, sending icy fragments of the creature flying across the floor of the walk-in freezer. He stands over the remains, completely exhausted but finally able to breathe for a second, even daring to wonder if his absolutely insane plan actually managed to kill the damn thing. But of course it didn't, as the shattered pieces immediately reform into a mass of writhing tendrils. His brief moment of relief evaporates into pure horror, realizing this thing just will not die. And before he can even think of another plan, the tendrils lash out and wrap around his body. He lets out a choked gasp as the creature's grip tightens, completely immobilizing him in an instant, with one of the thickest tendrils wrapping right around his neck and cutting off his air supply. And as his vision starts to fade, all he can think is that this is really the end for him. Just as Xiao Ji's vision starts to fade, Wang Qi bursts into the freezer with a fire axe, and he starts furiously hacking away at the tendrils wrapped around the kid, screaming for the monster to die as he brings the axe down again and again, completely tearing the creature apart in a desperate last-second rescue, finally managing to free Xiao Jie from the grotesque mass of tendrils. Wang Qi stands over the remains, catching his breath after that brutal takedown, immediately turning to ask Xiao Jie if he's alright after that incredibly close call. But the kid just stares back, saying he's okay before trailing off with a grim look, because he's just realized they now have an even bigger problem on their hands, pointing out that in their haste, the heavy freezer door has locked them both inside. Wang Qi immediately starts working the door, only to find it's completely sealed shut from the outside, and a quick glance at the thermostat confirms their new problem. The temperature is plummeting to negative 35 degrees. Xiao Jie can only huddle in the corner, his breath turning to frost in the rapidly chilling air. Their only hope, the control panel, turns out to be completely broken, leaving Wang Qi absolutely furious. He slumps against the wall, bitterly accepting they survived a monster just to die in a freezer. Trying to make sense of it all, he asks Xiao Jie how he even knew to lure the creature here, but the kid just stares at the floor, offering nothing but total silence in return, before coldly advising Wang Qi to talk less in order to conserve his energy and body heat. The response leaves Wang Qi completely baffled, wondering what kind of dull kid he's trapped with. So he tries a different angle, asking Xiao Jie where he'd even go if they somehow managed to get out alive. Xiao Jie finally breaks his silence, quietly admitting his only goal is to make it back home. Wang Qi is just thrilled the kid can talk, acting like they're suddenly old war buddies now. Flipping the question back, Xiao Jie asks what Wang Qi's own plans are, and it turns out he's on a classic revenge quest to avenge his brother, claiming it's the only thing that's been keeping him alive this whole time. The heavy reveal seems to get a rare reaction out of the usually stoic Xiao Jie, so Wang Qi presses on, finally asking for the kid's name to make things official. After a moment's hesitation, he introduces himself as Xiao Jie, which prompts Wang Qi to immediately propose they team up if they survive this freezer. But Xiao Jie just stares back, giving him absolutely nothing in return. Just as things look completely hopeless, the heavy freezer door slowly starts to creak open, revealing a silhouette standing in the doorway that neither of them were expecting to see, and it's Zhang Xiaomei, who somehow managed to get the door unlocked from the outside. Leaving both Xiao Jie and Wang Qi completely stunned by their sudden, unlikely rescue, she just gives them a slightly crazed smile, trying to lighten the mood by calling them handsome lads. But the two guys can only stare back, totally baffled by this entire situation. Meanwhile, across the city, the situation has escalated into a full-blown urban war zone where a heavily armed squad of soldiers begins gearing up for a major operation, their specialized cooling suits keeping them stable in the blistering heat, a luxury no one else has. And with their orders given, the unit moves out, ready to face the city's new horrors. That heavily armed military squad finally approaches their target office building, looking ready for a fight, and their captain warns them to keep their emotions in check, since fear apparently attracts these things, which is great advice right up until a massive creature drops on them from above, sending the squad into a panic. With no other choice, the captain screams for them to open fire on the incoming nightmare, and they unload everything they have into the giant squid-like monster, but it just keeps coming. In a flash, one of the creature's tendrils whips out and strikes a soldier down instantly. The attack is so fast the rest of the squad barely has time to react before it's over, and the thing crashes right into their formation, scattering the remaining soldiers like bowling pins. Realizing their bullets are just making things worse, the captain desperately orders everyone to cease fire. But it's too late, as a survivor reports heavy casualties and calls for backup over a field of fallen comrades. Meanwhile, the surviving soldier gets new orders over the radio. Reinforcements are on their way, but they need to move now, and the voice on the other end is desperate, demanding they bring someone back alive, no matter the cost. Back with our newly formed trio, they're trying to figure out where the hell to go from here, and Wang Qi's plan is simple. Grab supplies, find a defensible spot, and wait this whole nightmare out. But Zhang Xiaomei immediately calls him out, reminding him he already mentioned a survivor shelter on the top floor. He admits there's a troublesome guy up there, which is why he'd rather they just set up their own base. She seems to reconsider, suggesting that maybe rejoining the main group is the smarter play after all, before immediately clinging to Wang Qi, playing the damsel in distress card and saying she's too scared to be alone. Wang Qi, either a total sucker or just tired of arguing, immediately agrees to take her up there himself, but he clarifies he wants nothing to do with the guy upstairs, so he'll just drop her off and leave. Xiao Jie suddenly announces he's leaving to go home, telling the other two to head for the shelter on their own, which makes Wang Qi flip out, yelling that the city is full of monsters and he'll never make it alone. But Xiao Jie just stays silent, his expression completely set on this new grim mission. Without another word, he turns his back on them and starts walking down the empty hallway. But Wang Qi grabs his arm, reminding him they literally just agreed to stick together. That's when Xiao Ji reveals the real reason. He's already been bitten and doesn't know how much time he has left, insisting they shouldn't take the risk of staying with a guy who's basically a ticking time bomb, because he could turn into a monster at any moment. So he pulls away to continue on his path. Wang Qi and Zhang Xiaomei are left standing there, completely stunned by the sudden turn of events, and as they head for the shelter, Xiao Jie walks the other way, vowing to get to his mom no matter what. Meanwhile, the city outside has descended into a complete hellscape under a burning, apocalyptic sky, and down on the streets, the few people who are still human are wandering through the ruins, as grotesque, spider-like creatures now roam freely, feasting on anyone they can find, tearing through the city with absolute brutality and leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. In a bizarre twist, one of the monsters watching a news broadcast about the disaster, which is now a global crisis, on screen, a government official tries to reassure the public, promising that search and rescue teams have been dispatched, and he urges any survivors to make their way to the city stadium, which has been designated as a shelter. But his own terror is obvious as he admits the cell towers have collapsed, so good luck getting the word out. With a final desperate plea for everyone to survive this together, the broadcast cuts out into a wall of static. Leaving the city and the building, our survivors are completely isolated under the ominous red glow. Now on his own, Xiao Ji's only mission is to get home and make sure his mother is safe. But he pauses for a moment, pulling out his phone with a flicker of hope that service might be back online. Of course, it's completely dead, confirming the city's infrastructure has totally collapsed outside these walls, leaving him to accept there's only one dangerous path forward if he wants to survive this. His plan is to take the underground passage to the subway, a route he hopes is at least somewhat safer, though a quick mental map reveals it's a 2-hour walk, meaning he desperately needs supplies first. The convenience store on the first floor seems like the perfect place to stock up before the long journey. But as he thinks about what to grab, a strange realization hits him. He can't feel the blistering heat anymore. Looking down at himself, he notices he's not even sweating, which is completely impossible in this heat wave. And he touches his chest, suddenly questioning when these bizarre changes to his body actually began to take hold. Xiao Jie starts putting the pieces together, realizing the strange changes to his body began after he was first attacked. He remembers his body acting strangely ever since he woke up from that initial encounter, a detail he'd overlooked until now. With everything happening so fast, he never had a moment to process the bite marks on his neck, but now it's all clicking. The only explanation is the parasite itself, meaning the source of the chaos is also the source of his new abilities. He theorizes that getting bitten must somehow adapt the human body to the insane heat, which explains his own immunity. But that just raises an even bigger question. If he's infected, why hasn't he turned into a monster yet? Thinking back, he realizes every single mutation he's witnessed was directly tied to some overwhelming raw emotion. Even that evolved creature was screaming about wanting to feed on emotions, which seems to confirm the pattern. The horrifying truth dawns on him. He hasn't mutated because his entire life has been about suppressing his feelings. So that's the trigger. The key to transformation isn't just the bite, but the host's emotional state. With his new theory in mind, Xiaoji shakes off his doubts. Realizing his immunity to the heat is a massive advantage, he grips a makeshift weapon, knowing he absolutely has to stock up on supplies before his long journey. And his first target is the convenience store on the ground floor, the only logical place to start. Cautiously making his way through the building, he finally peeks around the corner towards the store's entrance, arriving at the storefront with a sigh of relief, glad he made it without running into any trouble. A quick scan of the entrance reveals no immediate signs of monsters, which is almost too good to be true, so with his weapon raised, he steps inside the ransacked store, ready for anything that might jump out. But what he finds inside makes him freeze in his tracks, his eyes widening in absolute horror. The floor is littered with the bodies of other survivors who clearly didn't make it out alive. A closer look reveals the horrifying cause of death, a parasite bursting from one of the victims. Forcing himself to stay calm, Xiao Jie starts scavenging, knowing any strong emotion could be a death sentence. He finds a box with a few remaining bottles and quickly starts packing them into his bag. Knowing he's on a tight schedule, he grabs what he can, not wanting to linger for a second longer. With his bag finally packed, he's all set to make a break for the underground passage. But a voice suddenly screams at him, claiming everything in the store already belongs to someone else. The unseen person then threatens him, saying he won't leave alive if he dares to take their stuff. Xiao Jie just stands there, completely unimpressed by the empty threats after everything he's just survived. Turns out the voice is coming from a security camera, meaning someone is watching his every move from a safe distance. The guy on the camera orders him to grab a walkie-talkie and haul all the supplies to the top floor like some delivery boy. He then tries to sell it as a good deal, telling Xiao Jie to listen up if he wants to live, but our boy looks less than convinced. After grabbing the walkie-talkie, Xiao Jie listens to the demands from the guy watching from the top floor, but instead of complying, he just looks up with a dead-eyed stare and flatly refuses the offer. His real response comes in the form of smashing the security camera to absolute bits with his weapon, completely destroying the only way the upstairs survivor could watch or communicate with him, a pretty clear message. With that conversation officially over, Xiao Jie turns his back on the mess and continues with his original plan, making his way to the door marked Underpass, the entrance to his planned subway route. He cautiously cracks it open and peers down into a pitch-black stairwell, knowing this won't be an easy walk. Forcing himself to stay calm, he remembers that any strong emotion could trigger his transformation down there. He tightens his grip on his weapon, steeling himself for whatever might be waiting in the darkness, and with his resolve set, he starts the long descent, stepping into the unknown depths of the underpass. As Xiao Jie descends into the underpass, a strange voice suddenly echoes in his head, admitting that it's scared, and the voice then asks if he's scared too, leaving him wondering what the hell is talking to him down there. He decides to ignore it for now, planning to just scout ahead and turn back if the path is blocked. Taking a deep breath, he continues his cautious walk down into the pitch-black stairwell, the oppressive silence of the underpass pressing in on him with every single step he takes, until he finally reaches the bottom of the stairs and carefully peeks around the corner, only to see a pair of glowing red eyes staring right back at him from the darkness, revealing a massive, grotesque insectoid creature clinging to the ceiling, which asks him again if he's scared. He immediately ducks back into cover, hoping the thing hasn't actually spotted him yet, desperately trying to suppress the wave of terror, knowing any strong emotion could be an absolute death sentence. Xiao Jie immediately backs out of the stairwell, deciding that fighting a giant telepathic bug is not on his to-do list. With the underpass officially blocked, he realizes he's got no choice but to try his luck on the monster-infested streets. His new plan is to find a working car and just drive home, which sounds simple enough until he's interrupted. A voice calls out from behind, and suddenly he's not alone in the hallway anymore. He turns around to find two guys blocking his path, looking like they're ready for a problem. One of them pulls a knife and demands Xiao Jie hand over all the supplies he just gathered. But after everything he's been through, our boy just gives them a dead-eyed stare, completely unimpressed. He thinks to himself how careless they're being, clearly underestimating who they're trying to rob. It clicks that these must be the goons working for the guy on the security camera, sent to collect his delivery. The thug with the knife gets impatient, yelling at him to hurry up and hand over the bag. The thug with the knife tells Xiao Jie he's not walking away with those supplies, but he hesitates for a second, noticing something deeply unsettling about the kid's eyes, realizing with a jolt that he can't sense a single shred of fear or any emotion from him at all. His partner decides to skip the talking and throws a punch, but Xiao Jie ducks under the attack, ending up on the floor as he dodges the clumsy assault from the second goon, which just pisses off the first guy, who raises his knife and decides to end this right now. But as he moves in for the kill, Xiao Jie's eyes dart right past him, locking onto the underpass door right behind them as a plan suddenly clicks into place. Because at that exact moment, a massive, sharp tendril bursts out from that very door, impaling the knife-wielding thug and pinning him to the wall as his partner watches in horror. The surviving thug is completely losing it, stammering about the monster while clutching his crowbar in pure terror, and he's practically begging for his life, his face a mask of sweat and absolute panic. Xiao Jie, on the other hand, just watches with that same dead-eyed calm he's perfected, showing not a single shred of fear as his little experiment continues to unfold. He gets right in the guy's face, grabbing his weapon and telling him to listen up if he wants to survive this. The thug is still rambling about running away, completely consumed by his own terror. So Xiao Jie gives him the secret to survival: drop the emotions and the monsters won't notice you. Surprisingly, the guy calms down, but mutters something about a drug working, leaving Xiao Jie totally confused. Just then, the monster's tendril retracts back through the underpass door, taking the other thug's body with it. But the moment the coast is clear, the now calm thug suddenly shoves Xiao Jie with all his might. Instead of falling, Xiao Jie uses the shove to throw the thug right into the monster's waiting tendril. The guy absolutely loses it, realizing he's been caught by the very thing he was trying to escape, but Xiao Jie grabs him, telling him to get a grip and control his emotions if he wants to survive, making it crystal clear that whether he lives or dies from this point on is entirely up to him. After dragging him into a nearby bathroom, the thug is left a mess on the floor, completely broken, while Xiao Jie pieces it together, realizing there were no cameras, so these guys had another way of finding him. He immediately asks about the drug the guy mentioned earlier, demanding to know what he was talking about, but the thug tries to deflect, saying that even after being saved, he can't talk about that subject. So Xiao Jie gives him a simple ultimatum, threatening to leave him behind if he doesn't start talking right now, which immediately gets the guy to crack, begging him to wait and promising to cooperate. The thug finally breaks, deciding that spilling his guts is a much better option than being left for dead, and he reveals their boss, some young master, supplies them with a special drug for their missions, which was developed after a ton of experiments to completely suppress a person's emotions, making them basically invisible to the monsters. But the effect only lasts for 15 minutes and has nasty side effects, and since the boss controls the supply, his men are just sitting ducks the moment it wears off. Xiao Jie isn't impressed by any of this, and just wants to know who this young master actually is, which makes the thug hesitate, clearly terrified of even talking about the guy. Turns out he's the son of the chairman and the literal owner of the entire building, a guy so powerful he can still pull strings to mobilize resources even in the middle of an apocalypse, and he's apparently built a private shelter on the top floor, right in the now-infested chairman's office. Meanwhile, on the top floor, the so-called young master addresses the main group of survivors in his private shelter, just as a frantic call comes crackling through on his walkie-talkie. It's one of his men, or maybe that surviving soldier, desperately trying to get a hold of him, begging for instructions while reporting his current position from the field. But the young master just calmly tells him where to find the new rendezvous point, looking completely unbothered. He then casually puts the radio away, his hand resting right next to the gun on his hip, before turning back to his captive audience with a reassuring speech about how rescue is on the way. He boasts about their safe location and resources, positioning himself as their one and only savior, and he makes sure to remind everyone that he's the one holding the weapon here, ending with a chilling promise that if they just listen to him, he'll make sure they all survive. Meanwhile, Wang Qi and Zhang Xiaomei finally make their way up towards the top-floor shelter, arriving at a heavily reinforced door that looks like it leads to the promised safe zone, only to be greeted by a guard with a gun who doesn't seem too happy to see new faces. The guard immediately demands to know who they are, clearly not running an open-door policy for survivors, so Wang Qi tries to play it cool, explaining they're just looking for a safe place to hide out, which prompts the guard to radio his boss for instructions before making any sudden moves. And on the other end is the young master himself, looking way too pleased with this little power trip. He gives the order to let them in, probably seeing them as just two more subjects to control. The guard complies, ushering them inside at gunpoint just to make the power dynamic crystal clear, and they step into a room full of terrified survivors, all under the thumb of the one and only young master. After getting the info he needs, Xiao Jie tells the terrified thug to take him upstairs to meet the boss. While on the top floor, the young master welcomes Wang Qi and Zhang Xiaomei to his barricaded shelter. The two of them, along with the other survivors, look on with suspicion as he begins his grand tour. He kicks things off by boasting about the continuous air conditioning, a massive luxury in this heat wave, then lays out the bathroom rules, which include a generous one shower per week policy for everyone, followed by the daily rations. Just enough water and bread to keep everyone completely dependent on him. He adds that anyone who makes great contributions will get extra food, establishing his system of control, and the friendly act drops as he makes it clear this all works as long as they do exactly what he says. But just as he's enjoying the moment, one of the survivors timidly raises a hand to interrupt, asking how their safety can be guaranteed when the young master's crew has all the weapons. The young master responds to the question with a cold, condescending look, clearly not a fan of anyone questioning his authority, so he pulls a gun on the guy, promising he won't be the one to end him. A classic do-what-I-say power move. The poor survivor immediately starts begging for his life, completely terrified by the sudden escalation. But watching from the side, Wang Chi looks absolutely done with this guy's little power trip already. He steps in and physically stops the young master, grabbing the gun away from the survivor's head, telling him to knock it off and putting a very public end to the whole intimidation display. Realizing he's been called out, the boss tries to play it off as a joke, telling everyone to lighten up, but then he turns his full attention to Wang Chi, demanding to know who this new problem is. After getting his name, the young master invites Wang Chi for a chat, which sounds a lot more like a threat, leaving both him and Zhang Xiaomei to realize they've just made a powerful enemy in their new shelter. After that little monster encounter, Xiao Jie takes a moment to wash up in the bathroom, and once the evidence is down the drain, he calmly turns off the water, taking a second to compose himself in the mirror with a look of pure, cold determination. His new guide, meanwhile, is a nervous wreck, explaining their first stop is the young master's private elevator, which is apparently just behind a nearby fire door, so Xiao Jie grabs his weapon, ready to go. He looks down at the terrified thug and gives him a simple, chilling order. Lead the way. The guy reluctantly opens the door, probably wishing he was anywhere else right now, and they start walking down the hallway, with Xiao Jie keeping a very close eye on his new ally. The thug stammers that they're almost there, trying to sound confident but failing miserably. Xiao Jie just agrees, but you can tell he's already thinking, trying to piece together what just happened back there. As they walk, Xiao Jie feels the bite on his neck throbbing, a sign that something is seriously wrong, and his mind starts to go fuzzy, which makes his terrified guide wonder what the hell is happening. Before Xiao Jie suddenly collapses to the floor, completely unconscious from the internal struggle, the thug just stares down at him, looking more concerned than you'd expect from a random goon. And as he crouches down, it becomes clear this was never just a simple shakedown. Turns out he's reporting directly to the young master, explaining Xiao Jie likely fainted fighting off the parasite. He notes that unlike other victims, Xiao Jie has shown no signs of mutation and retained his independence. On the other end of the line, the young master listens to this report with intense interest, realizing with a grim look that they may have just found the key to everything.